many women's lives. When the real question is no longer, does he love me? The real question becomes, am I willing to love myself enough to stop negotiating with what hurts me? And that is not a small question. That is not a dramatic question. That is not an angry question. That is a sacred question. Because when a woman finds the strength to walk away from a man she deeply loves, not because the love was fake, not because her heart is cold, not because she never cared, but because he is not loving her back in a way that is healthy, consistent, safe, and honest, something profound happens. It may not feel powerful at first. At first it feels like grief. It feels like shaking. It feels like second guessing. It feels like losing sleep. It feels like staring at your phone. It feels like talking yourself out of texting him. It feels like wondering whether you asked for too much, said too much, felt too much, needed too much. But what is actually happening in that moment is this. You are interrupting a pattern. You are refusing to keep calling pain by the name of love. You are making room for truth. And truth always needs space. That is one of the hardest lessons many of us will ever learn. Clarity requires space, not obsession, not over-explaining, not convincing, not bargaining, not performing worthiness. Space. Because sometimes the very reason we cannot see clearly is because we are standing too close to the thing that is harming us. Think about that. When something is constant access to us, our attention, our body, our energy, our forgiveness, our emotional labor, our hope, it can become casual with what should be precious. And the tragedy is not just that they become casual. The tragedy is that we can become confused. We start confusing familiarity with safety. We confuse intensity with intimacy. We confuse longing with connection. We confuse chemistry with character. We confuse being chosen occasionally with being loved consistently. And one of the bravest things a woman can do is say, I may love you, but I will not stay where love is used to diminish me. Now let's be honest. That sounds beautiful in a quote. It sounds powerful on a stage. It sounds clean when you put it over piano music and a black background and post it online. But in real life, walking away is messy. Walking away can feel like withdrawal. Walking away can feel like going against every attachment wound you have. Walking away can feel like disappointing the younger version of you, who thought if she just loved harder, stayed longer, explained better, forgave deeper, sacrificed more, then finally, she would be chosen in the way she deserved. So this conversation is not about arrogance. It is not about playing games. It is not about punishing someone by withdrawing. It is about dignity. It is about understanding that love without respect will break your spirit. It is about knowing that access to you is not a human right. It is something to be earned, honored, and handled with care. And when someone cannot handle your heart with care, sometimes the holiest thing you can do is close the door. Not because you stopped loving, but because you started telling the truth. Why walking away creates clarity. There is an uncomfortable truth about human nature. Sometimes people do not fully recognize the value of what they have while they still have unlimited access to it. That is not always cruelty. Sometimes it is immaturity. Sometimes it is emotional laziness. Sometimes it is entitlement. Sometimes it is blindness. Access can create blindness. When something good is always there, always available, always forgiving, always waiting, always understanding, always staying, it can become background noise to the person receiving it. Not because it lacks value, but because proximity can distort perception. If you stand at the base of a skyscraper and press your face against the front door, you cannot really see the building. You are too close. You do not have perspective. But step back. Take distance, create space, and suddenly the whole structure comes into view. The same thing happens in relationships. When there is always another call, another chance, another explanation, another apology you did not earn, another emotional rescue, another opening, another return. Some people never have to confront what your absence means. Your absence is sometimes the first honest mirror they have ever faced. And your absence is often the first honest mirror you have ever faced too. because space doesn't only reveal them, it reveals you. It reveals how much of yourself you have abandoned trying to keep somebody from abandoning you. It reveals how often you called anxiety love. It reveals how long you have been surviving on potential instead of presence. It reveals whether you are in a relationship with a person or with a fantasy of who they might become if they finally chose to do the work. And that is where healing begins. Healing begins when the fantasy dies and the truth is allowed to live. The woman walks away is not WX. I think we have to tell a more honest story about women who leave. Too often, culture gives women two bad options. If she stays too long, people say she has no standards. If she leaves, they say she is too hard, too proud, too demanding, too independent, too much. But a woman who walks away from what dishonors her is not too much. She is grieving and brave at the same time. She is heartbroken and wise at the same time. She is tender and fierce at the same time. And that matters because many women have been taught a false version of femininity, one that says goodness means endless accommodation, smile more, need less, forgive faster, be understanding, be patient, don't be intimidating, don't ask for too much clarity, don't be difficult, don't ruin the vibe, don't have standards you're willing to enforce. But boundaries are not cruelty. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me at the same time. Let me say that again because somebody needs to hear it in their bones. A boundary is the distance at which I can love you and still remain loyal to myself. That means walking away is not always rejection. Sometimes it is self-respect in motion. Sometimes walking away says, I'm not going to beg you to be who you already told me you are not ready to be. I'm not going to keep auditioning for a role that should have been mine in your life by now. I'm not going to keep mistaking mixed signals for depth. I'm not going to call emotional unavailability mysterious. I'm not going to keep bleeding in a place that calls my pain proof of love. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. Love is not proven by how much pain you can endure somewhere along the way. Too many people learned that the depth of their love is measured by the amount of pain they are willing to tolerate. So they stay. They stay through confusion. They stay through disrespect. They stay through inconsistency. They stay through silence. They stay through half love, half truth, half commitment, half effort. And because they stay, they tell themselves the relationship must be meaningful. Because surely if it hurts this much, it must matter this much. But pain is not proof of destiny. Suffering is not evidence of soul connection. Endurance is not the same thing as intimacy. And one of the most transformative moments in emotional healing is when a woman realizes my ability to survive bad love does not mean I am called to keep surviving it. That is the shift. Because many women are incredibly strong. The problem is not that they are weak. The problem is that they have often used their strength to endure what should have ended. They use resilience to tolerate inconsistency, empathy to excuse disrespect, hope to deny reality, compassion to abandon themselves. But your strength was not given to you so you could remain inside cycles that keep shrinking you. Your strength was given to you so you could tell the truth, so you could leave denial, so you could rebuild your life, so you could become trustworthy to yourself. And self-trust is everything, because the deepest wound is not always, he hurt me. Sometimes the deepest wound is, I knew something was wrong and I kept leaving myself there. That is a painful truth, but it is also a liberating one. Because once you begin rebuilding self-trust, everything changes. You stop looking for chemistry before character. You stop glorifying confusion. You stop romanticizing people you have to recover from. You stop handing out access where there has been no evidence of integrity. You stop calling crumbs a meal. The difference, BET, when hunger and thirst. Now let's talk about something uncomfortable. There is a difference between being hungry for love and being thirsty for validation. Healthy hunger says, I desire partnership. I desire connection. I desire mutuality. I desire to love and be loved. There is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing embarrassing about wanting love. There is nothing needy about wanting to be known. We are wired for connection. But thirstiness, emotional desperation that makes you abandon your standards just to avoid being alone often creates dynamics where respect starts collapsing. Because when someone learns that your fear of losing them is greater than your commitment to honoring yourself, the power balance changes. And let me be careful here, because this is not about blaming wounded people for being wounded. Desperation is often the language of unmet needs, abandonment wounds, trauma bonds, and old shame. So this is not judgment. This is naming. When we are disconnected from our worth, we can become willing to accept almost anything that temporarily relieves loneliness. A text at midnight feels like devotion. A half apology feels like growth. A breadcrumb feels like progress. A return feels like redemption, and yet beneath all of that is a painful question. If I stop reaching, will anyone choose me? That question can drive entire relationship patterns. But here's the truth. The love that is meant for your life will not require you to become smaller, quieter, needier, or less honest in order to keep it. And yes, many people lose respect when they realize they can behave badly, and you will still be there. Still pleading, still explaining, still accepting what should never have been normal. Not because you are unworthy, but because unattended desperation distorts relational reality. That is why self-respect matters so much. Self-respect says, I can miss you and still mean goodbye. I can love you and still leave. I can be devastated and still refuse to betray myself. I can be disappointed and still keep the boundary. That is grown woman power, not pretending you don't care, not acting cold, not becoming cynical, caring deeply without collapsing your standards. That is maturity. When someone loathes you, it shows in how they handle your hurt. I think one of the most important things we can learn is that love is not just what someone feels. Love is what someone is willing to practice. A person may feel attachment to you and still not have the emotional maturity to love you well. A person may desire you and still be unsafe for your nervous system. A person may come back to you and still not be transformed. A person may say all the right words and still not be able to sustain truth, consistency, repair, and respect. So the question is not just, do they have feelings for me? The question is, can they be honest? Can they be consistent? Can they be accountable? Can they repair harm? Can they respect my boundaries? Can they communicate without manipulation? Can they tolerate intimacy without turning every vulnerable moment into control, punishment, distance, or confusion? Because if the answer is no, then what you have may be chemistry. It may be attachment, it may be longing, it may be history, it may be trauma activation. But it is not yet the kind of love that can build a peaceful life. And peace matters. At some point, every woman must decide that peace is sexy, clarity is sexy, consistency is sexy, emotional safety is sexy, mutual effort is sexy, mutual effort is sexy, being deeply seen and deeply respected is sexy. And chaos, no matter how passionate, stops being impressive once you have healed enough to recognize it as instability. Why it is so hard to walk away now. If all of this were simple, people would leave the first time they were dishonored. But that's not how attachment works. That's not how trauma works. That's not how hope works. It is hard to walk away for so many reasons. Sometimes it is because you remember the beginning, and beginnings can be intoxicating. Beginnings are full of possibility. Beginnings are often full of projection. Beginnings are where we place our dreams onto a person before reality has had time to interrupt the fantasy. And so when the relationship becomes painful, we do not only grieve what happened, we grieve what we believed could happen. We grieve the future we imagined. We grieve the version of them we met in our hope. And sometimes we keep returning, not because the relationship is truly good, but because we are addicted to trying to get the original promise back. That is why people get trapped in cycles, not because they are foolish, not because they are pathetic, not because they enjoy suffering, but because intermittent reinforcement is powerful. a little affection, a little distance, a little apology, a little warmth, a little silence, a little future talk, a little withdrawal. And the nervous system gets trained to chase relief. This is why so many strong, intelligent, accomplished women can find themselves entangled in relationships that make no sense from the outside. From the outside, people say, just leave. From the inside, it feels like leaving means ripping out a piece of your own identity. And that is why compassion matters. Not shame, not simplistic advice, not superiority, compassion with truth. You do not need to judge yourself for how long it took. But you do need to tell the truth about what staying is costing you, because every day you remain in a pattern that erodes your dignity. Something is being spent. Your joy, your clarity, your confidence, your ability to trust your own perception, your emotional energy, your openness to healthier love, your relationship with yourself, and eventually the cost becomes too high. No contact is not petty. IT is often medicine. There are some dynamics where distance is not just helpful, it is necessary, especially when you are dealing with manipulation, emotional chaos, repeated dishonesty, or patterns that keep reactivating your hope just when you are trying to heal. Sometimes you cannot heal in ongoing contact with the thing that keeps reopening the wound. That is not punishment, that is medicine. Because every message, every late night check-in, every just wanted to see how you're doing, every social media view, every little symbolic breadcrumb can pull you back into emotional confusion. And when you are vulnerable, confusion feels like possibility. That is the danger. Some people know exactly how to re-enter just enough to keep access without offering accountability. They know how to stir nostalgia. They know how to reference your bond. They know how to become momentarily tender. They know how to awaken the memory of who they were when they were trying to win you. And if you are not grounded, you will start editing the past. You will remember the best moments and minimize the real harm. You will say, maybe this time. You will say, he seems different. You will say, maybe I overreacted. You will say, maybe what we have is rare. Meanwhile, your body has been anxious for months. Your sleep has been fractured. Your self-esteem has been thinning. Your friends are exhausted watching you disappear. And your intuition has been whispering truths your fear does not want to hear. Sometimes the only way to let the truth get louder than the longing is silence. No contact, no performance, no monitoring, no just checking in, no emotional loopholes. You do not do it because you are angry. You do it because your heart needs a protected place to detox from confusion, and healing requires detox. The wrong love can make you a navel for the real life. One of the quiet tragedies of staying entangled with the wrong person is that they can occupy space that should belong to your healing, your peace, your calling, your choice, your purpose, and yes, sometimes even the right relationship. When you are preoccupied by someone who cannot meet you, you are not emotionally available for what can. When you are obsessed with getting clarity from someone committed to confusion, you have no energy left for your own life. When you are tied to a cycle, your future waits outside the door while you keep revisiting a room that has already taught you its lesson. And I want to say this tenderly, sometimes the greatest loss is not losing them. Sometimes the greatest loss is how much of yourself disappeared while trying not to lose them. Your peace matters. Your calling matters. Your body matters. Your friendships matter. Your children, your dreams, your work, your joy, your faith, your purpose, these things matter. And a relationship that chronically destabilizes you is not just affecting romance, it is affecting your whole life. That is why walking away is sometimes bigger than the person. It is a declaration to your future. It is saying, I will not let confusion consume the years that belong to my becoming. Success should be earned, not automatic. One of the wisest metaphors for relationships is the idea of access. Not everyone should have the same access to you. Some people can meet you at the gate. Some people can enter the living room. Some people, after trust, consistency, integrity, and time, may be welcomed deeper into your life. But too many people give premium access to people who have only offered introductory behavior. They hand over emotional intimacy before trust is established. They hand over physical intimacy before safety is proven. They hand over loyalty before commitment is clear. They hand over the softest parts of themselves because chemistry makes them feel chosen. But access without discernment often leads to pain because access magnifies impact. The closer someone gets to your heart, the more careful they should be with it. And if a person wants deep access, then deep responsibility should come with it. That is not old-fashioned. That is emotionally intelligent. You do not owe instant vulnerability to someone because they are charming. You do not owe full access because there is attraction. You do not owe your body, your history, your softness, your deepest wounds, your deepest hopes, simply because someone expresses interest. Interest is not integrity. Desire is not devotion. Attention is not commitment. Words are not proof. And women especially need permission to stop feeling guilty for moving slowly. Slow is not fear. Slow can be wisdom. Slow can be self-honor. Slow can be self-honor. Slow can be nervous system safety. Slow can be discernment. The right person will not be offended by your standards. They will be revealed by them. Self-loathing is not selfie. It's relational wisdom. Before you can really choose well, you have to know yourself well. If you do not know who you are, you will keep asking attraction to tell you. If you do not know what you deserve, you will keep negotiating with what wounds you. If you do not know your values, your loneliness will make decisions your wisdom would never approve. Self-love is not just bubble baths and affirmations and inspirational music. Self-love is also grief work. It is also honesty. It is also saying, I keep choosing people who confirm an old wound, and I need to understand why. It is saying, I say I want peace, but I am addicted to unpredictability. It is saying, I confuse being pursued with being cherished. It is saying, I feel most bonded when I have to earn love, and that is telling me something important about what still needs healing in me. That is hard work. That is sacred work. And that is why the journey toward healthy love is not primarily a hunt for the right person. It is also a return to yourself, to your values, to your body, to your voice, to your body, to your voice, to your boundaries, to your joy, to your discernment, to the part of you that always knew when something felt off but was talked out of her knowing. The more at home you become within yourself, the less likely you are to call emotional chaos home. What or love builds real love does not need you to betray yourself in order to preserve it. Real love builds trust. It builds safety. It builds emotional steadiness. It builds a life. It does not require one person to shrink while the other gets all the room. It does not ask one person to carry all the empathy, all the patience, all the labor, all the repair, all the humility, all the self-abandonment. Mutual love has mutual weight-bearing. Both people show up. Both people repair. Both people own impact. Both people respect the line where frustration must not become contempt. Both people protect the dignity of the relationship, especially in conflict. And one of the clearest signs of maturity is this: you can disagree without degrading each other. You can be hurt without becoming cruel. You can have needs without using manipulation. You can say no without punishment. You can set a boundary without it becoming a war. That is love with a spine. That is love with character. That is love that can last. Exclusion section. So if you are in that place right now, if your heart is torn, if you are trying to decide whether to keep holding on or finally let go, I want to say something to you as clearly as I know how. You are not hard to love because you need honesty. You are not too demanding because you want consistency. You are not too much because you desire peace. You are not unreasonable because you want to be treated with care. And if somebody can only love you while you are minimizing your needs, silencing your intuition, reducing your standards, and tolerating behavior that breaks your spirit, that is not a sign that you need to become easier. It is a sign that what they are offering cannot meet the woman you are becoming. Walk away if you need to, cry if you need to, grieve what you hoped it would become, miss them if you must. But do not confuse missing someone with needing to return to what harmed you. Some endings are not failures. Some endings are the first honest thing that has happened in a long time. Sometimes walking away is not the loss of love. Sometimes walking away is the beginning of it. The beginning of loving yourself enough to stop settling for pain with pretty language. The beginning of trusting your own voice again. The beginning of discovering that peace feels unfamiliar only because chaos had become normal. The beginning of a life where you are no longer asking, how do I get them to choose me? Because now the deeper question is, will I choose myself? And when the answer becomes yesfully, courageously, consistently, yes, your whole life changes. Because the woman who chooses herself does not become closed. She becomes clear. She does not become cold. She becomes anchored. She does not become unreachable. She becomes discerning. And from that place, whether love comes tomorrow, later, or in a completely unexpected form, she is no longer available for what fractures her. She is available for what honors her. She is available for what is mutual. She is available for what is true. And that more than being chased, more than being wanted, more than being temporarily adored is what makes love worth having. And maybe this is the part nobody says out loud enough. Walking away does not always feel empowering in the moment. Sometimes walking away feels like trembling. Sometimes it feels like doubt. Sometimes it feels like sitting on the edge of your bed, staring at your phone, arguing with yourself over whether to send one more message, one more explanation, one more I just need closure. But the truth is, a lot of us are not actually asking for closure. We are asking for relief. We are asking for the pain to stop. We are asking for the confusion to make sense. We are asking for the person who hurt us to suddenly become the person who heals us. And that is one of the most heartbreaking traps of all, because the same person who created the wound is often not capable of creating the healing. Let that sit for a second. The same person who trained your nervous system to panic cannot always be the same person who teaches it peace. The same person who normalized inconsistency cannot always be the one who gives you safety. The same person who made you question your worth cannot always be the one who restores your self-trust. And yet, so many of us keep going back, not because we are weak, not because we are foolish, not because we are broken beyond repair, but because some part of us still believes that if they finally choose us correctly, then all the pain will mean something. That is the seduction. Not just the person, the meaning. We want the story to mean something. We want the waiting to mean something. We want the tears to mean something. We want the sleepless nights and the overthinking and the emotional labor and the loyalty and the hope. We want it all to lead somewhere beautiful, because otherwise we have to face the grief of what it cost us. And grief is honest. Grief says, this mattered to me. This hurt me. This changed me. This was not small. This was not casual. This was not easy to release. But grief also says something else. It's over. And that finality is what many people fear more than pain itself. Because if it's over, then I have to meet myself again. If it's over, then I have to build a life that doesn't revolve around waiting. If it's over, then I have to stop making him the center of my emotional weather. If it's over, then I have to become responsible for my own healing. And healing is beautiful, yes, but healing is also work. It is the work of not romanticizing what your body experienced as chaos. It is the work of not rewriting the past just because you missed the person. It is the work of sitting with loneliness without letting loneliness make decisions for you. Because loneliness can be loud. Loneliness can convince you that almost love is better than no love. Loneliness can convince you that confusion is better than emptiness. Loneliness can convince you to text people you already asked God to remove from your life. Loneliness can make you nostalgic for places that nearly destroyed you. And if you do not understand that, you will think every urge to return is love. It isn't always love. Sometimes it's withdrawal. Sometimes it's withdrawal. Sometimes it's trauma activation. Sometimes it's your nervous system begging for the familiar, even when the familiar was painful. Sometimes it's the old story and you saying, please don't leave me with myself. I don't know how to be here yet. That is why the woman who walks away needs more than courage. She needs support. She needs truth. She needs rituals. She needs reminders. She needs people around her who can hold the line when her emotions are trying to pull her backwards. Because feelings are real, but they are not always reliable narrators. You can miss someone and still know they are wrong for your life. You can't get there. Whatever your metric is, whatever your reconciliation would cost too much. You can't long for someone and still understand that longing is not instruction. And I think that matters because so many women shame themselves for still feeling attached after they've left. They say, if I was really over it, I wouldn't care anymore. If I was really strong, I wouldn't miss him. If I really believed I deserved better, this wouldn't still hurt. No, that's not how healing works. Healing does not mean you stop feeling. Healing means you stop obeying every feeling. That's maturity. Maturity is not numbness. It is self-leadership. It is saying, yes, I miss you. And no, I will not return to what harms me. Yes, this is painful. And no, pain will not make my decisions for me. Yes, part of me still loves you, but the wiser part of me now loves me too. That is a powerful sentence. The wiser part of me now loves me too. Because for a lot of people, self-abandonment looked like loyalty, over-functioning looked like live, silence looked like patience, self-erasure looks like maturity, and being easy to disappoint became their whole relationship pattern. But healthy love does not ask you to disappear in order to stay connected. Healthy love does not make your self-respect the sacrifice on the altar of romance. And I want to talk for a moment about self-respect because people use that phrase all the time. But what does it actually look like in real life? Self-respect is not just a mindset. Self-respect is behavioral. Self-respect is not just saying, I know my worth. Self-respect is acting like your worth has terms and conditions. It means if honesty matters to you, you do not keep negotiating with lies. If consistency matters to you, you do not keep rewarding hot and cold behavior. If tenderness matters to you, you do not keep normalizing cruelty just because it is followed by apologies. If commitment matters to you, you do not keep building a life around someone who only shows up when it is convenient. Self-respect has follow-through, and follow-through is hard when your heart is attached. That is why so many people have standards in theory, but not in practice. In theory, they know what they deserve. In practice, they panic when the boundary is tested. In theory, they say, if he disrespects me, I'm done. In practice, he comes back with just enough tenderness, just enough chemistry, just enough familiarity, just enough regret, and suddenly the line moves. And every time the line moves, something inside you notices. Your soul notices. Your body notices. Your intuition notices. You may not have language for it in the moment, but your whole being registers when you keep teaching people that your boundaries are negotiable. And over time, the deepest damage is not just what they did. It is what you had to ignore to keep staying. That's why coming back to yourself is so sacred. Coming back to yourself means no longer gaslighting your own spirit. It means no longer calling red flags miscommunication. It means no longer calling emotional unavailability, he's just scared. It means no longer calling lack of effort, he's just going through a lot. It means no longer turning yourself into a translator for behavior that is already clear. Because confusion has a cost. Let me say that slowly. Confusion has a cost. When you are always trying to figure somebody out, you are burning emotional energy that belongs to your life. When you are always decoding mixed signals, you are losing focus for your purpose. When you are always recovering from what someone said, what they didn't say, why they disappeared, why they came back, what they meant, whether they care you, are emotionally spending yourself on instability. And women are often taught to overinterpret instead of simply observe. But clarity sometimes looks like this. If they wanted to be queer, they would be clear. If they wanted to be consistent, they would be consistent. They would be consistent. If they wanted to protect the connection, they would stop behaving like it is disposable, not perfection, but pattern. And patterns tell the truth louder than potential ever will. Potential is seductive. Potential says, he could become, this could turn into, we might eventually, if he just heals, if the timing was different, if I'm patient enough. But potential is one of the most dangerous things to date when it is not matched by present day character. Because you cannot build a peaceful life with potential. You build a peaceful life with patterns, with habits, with integrity, with emotional responsibility, with truth-telling, with someone who doesn't just know how to desire connection, but also knows how to sustain it. And that's the shift a lot of women have to make. Stop asking, could this be amazing someday? And start asking, what is this costing me today? That question can change your life. What is this costing me today? Is it costing me my sleep, my confidence, my focus, my emotional safety, my peace, my relationship with myself? Because sometimes people stay, not because the relationship is beautiful, but because they have become so attached to the dream that they stop measuring the damage. And damage doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes damage looks like anxiety becoming your baseline. Sometimes damage looks like constantly checking your phone. Sometimes damage looks like shrinking your needs so you won't be too much. Sometimes damage looks like becoming hypervigilant. Sometimes damage looks like losing interest in your own life because all your energy is tied up in trying to stabilize someone else's love. That is still damage. And your body keeps records. Your mind tries to minimize. Your body knows when you do not feel safe. Your body knows when affection is unpredictable. Your body knows when you are performing instead of resting. Your body knows when you are overgiving just to keep someone close. Your body knows when you are silencing the truth to avoid abandonment. This is why healing is not just cognitive. It is embodied. It is teaching your body that peace is allowed, that slowness is allowed, that mutuality is allowed, that you do not have to earn every drop of affection by overextending yourself. And maybe that's the next lesson for somebody listening to this. You do not have to audition for love. You do not have to be perfect enough, useful enough, beautiful enough, patient enough, agreeable enough, sexy enough, understanding enough, successful enough, healed enough, quiet enough, accommodating enough to deserve consistent love. Love is not a prize for self-erasure. The right relationship does not ask you to become less alive in order to keep it. And yet many people have spent years in relational environments where they learned to scan the room before speaking, soften their truth before expressing it, dress their needs in apology, and carry the emotional temperature of the connection like it was their sole responsibility. That is exhausting. And it also tells you something very important. If peace only exists when you silence yourself, that is not peace. That is compliance. Real peace can hold your truth. Real peace does not punish honesty. Real peace does not withdraw affection every time you name a need. Real peace does not require a performance to maintain connection. So if walking away feels brutal, maybe it's because you're not just losing a person. Maybe you are losing a role. The role of fixer, the role of pursuer, the role of overgiver, the role of emotional caretaker, the role of the one who understands him better than anyone, the role of the one who stays no matter what. And roles can be addictive. Because roles give identity, even when they bring suffering. That's why some people don't know who they are outside the relationships that drain them. They know how to rescue. They know how to wait. They know how to overlove. They know how to overlove. They know how to endure. But they do not know how to simply receive healthy, steady, unconfusing love. So when that kind of love appears, it can even feel boring at first. Why? Because your nervous system may have been trained to interpret chaos as chemistry. If someone is unpredictable, you feel activated. If someone is hard to read, you feel intrigued. If someone pulls away, you feel compelled to pursue. If someone gives crumbs, you feel euphoric over bare minimum effort. And then a healthy person comes along, consistent, kind, respectful, emotionally available, and part of you says, "Where's the spark?" But sometimes what you are calling spark is actually instability. Sometimes the butterflies are not intuition. Sometimes they are anxiety. And that is a hard truth to sit with, because it means some of us have to relearn attraction. We have to relearn what safety feels like. We have to relearn what slowness feels like. We have to relearn what it means for someone to be interested without being manipulative, present without being overwhelming, kind without having to create confusion first. That takes time. And this is why I believe that after heartbreak, after emotional chaos, after cycles of on and off connection, after relationships that made you question your worth, the next assignment is not find love fast. The next assignment is often find yourself honestly. Find your standards, find your center, find your voice, find the version of you that no longer begs to be met halfway, find the part of you that knows peace is not too much to ask for. Find the woman in you who can be disappointed without abandoning herself. That woman is powerful, not because she never cries, not because she never hurts, not because she is detached from love, but because she has learned that love and self-betrayal can no longer coexist in her life. And I want to say something to the woman who keeps trying to explain herself into being understood. You do not have to explain your pain to someone who benefits from misunderstanding it. You do not have to keep turning your wounds into presentations. You do not have to keep handing out detailed maps to your heart, hoping that this time someone will care enough to follow directions. At some point, the evidence speaks. At some point, the pattern is the closure. At some point, your peace has to matter more than your need to be fully understood by the one who kept choosing behavior that confused you. And yes, closure is beautiful when it happens. Yes, honest conversations are beautiful when both people are capable of them. Yes, mature endings are beautiful, but a lot of people are waiting for a level of accountability from someone who has never shown the capacity for it. And that wait can become its own prison. So sometimes closure sounds like this: I have seen enough. I do not need one more painful conversation to validate what my body already knows. I do not need one more contradiction, one more disappearance, one more false return, one more apology without change. I believe the pattern now. I release the fantasy that one final conversation will make this easy. I choose peace over perfect understanding. That is closure too. And maybe not glamorous closure, maybe not cinematic closure, but mature closure. There is a different kind of beauty that comes when a woman stops asking, "How do I get him to see my value?" and starts asking, "Why did I keep trying to prove value where there was so little capacity to honor it?" That question shifts the focus, because the healing is not just about them seeing more clearly. It is also about you seeing more clearly, seeing where you tolerated too much, seeing where you tolerated too much, seeing where loneliness overruled discernment, seeing where hope became denial, seeing where chemistry became an excuse, seeing where childhood wounds, old insecurities, abandonment fears, and the desire to be chosen may have kept you in dynamics beneath your actual standard. And this is not to shame you. This is to free you, because what can be named can be changed. What can be owned can be healed. What can be faced can stop running your life from the shadows. And I think one of the most healing moments in a woman's life is when she stops making heartbreak only about loss and starts allowing it to become revelation. What did this reveal about me? What did this reveal about the kind of love I still mistake for intimacy? What did this reveal about my fear of being alone? What did this reveal about the places where I still don't trust that healthy love is possible for me? What did this reveal about the standards I speak, but do not yet enforce, because heartbreak can become a teacher if you let it. A brutal teacher, yes. A painful teacher, yes. But sometimes one of the clearest teachers in your life. It teaches you what charm without character looks like. It teaches you what attention without intention looks like. It teaches you what desire without discipline looks like. It teaches you what words without weight look like. It teaches you how dangerous it is to ignore your own knowing. And if you let it, it can also teach you something holy, that your tenderness is not the problem. Your capacity to love deeply is not the problem. Your loyalty is not the problem. Your hope is not the problem. Your softness is not the problem. The issue is where you place those gifts. A good heart in the wrong hands will start believing it is too much, too emotional, too needy, too intense. But a good heart in safe hands begins to soften, not because it is less powerful, but because it is finally not in survival mode. So do not confuse your exhaustion with emotional depth. Do not confuse your anxiety with soul connection. Do not confuse your inability to let go with evidence that the relationship was meant to be. Sometimes the hardest bond to break is simply the one that triggered your deepest wound. That does not make it sacred. It makes it significant. And significant is not always sustainable. So what happens after you walk away? That's the question a lot of people ask. What happens after you walk away? At first, silence. At first, detox. At first, nights that feel longer than they should. At first, memories arriving without permission. At first, sunset hit too hard. At first, your body reaching for what is no longer there. At first, the temptation to check, reach, peek, reopen. And if you stay with yourself through that, something else begins to happen. Your mind gets quieter. Your sleep gets deeper. Your body starts unclenching. Your joy returns in small pieces. Your laughter stops sounding forced. Food tastes like food again. Music starts feeling like music again. Color returns to your life. Your friends start saying, "You seem more like yourself." And maybe for the first time in a long time, you begin to realize how much energy it took to remain in a place that kept draining you. That awareness is powerful. Because now you understand peace is not boring. Peace is restorative. Clarity is not empty. Clarity is spacious. Solitude is not failure. Solitude can be sacred. And from that place, you stop seeing being alone as punishment. You start seeing it as preparation. Preparation for healthier love. Preparation for deeper self-trust. Preparation for a life that is not built around earning crumbs. And whether or not someone new comes immediately is not even the first victory. The first victory is this: you stayed with yourself. You did not run back to the thing that hurt you just because healing was uncomfortable. You did not betray your boundary just because the grief was loud. You did not abandon your knowing just because your heart was lonely. You stayed, and that changes a person. It changes how you walk into rooms. It changes how you listen to red flags. It changes how quickly you hand over access. It changes how willing you are to wait for what is mutual. Because now you know you can survive disappointment. You can survive endings. You can't survive not being chosen by the wrong person. And once a woman truly knows that, manipulation loses a lot of power. Because manipulation feeds on fear. Fear of loss. Fear of loneliness. Fear of replacement. Fear of not being enough. But when you know deep in your bones that losing the wrong person is not the same as losing yourself, you become harder to control. That is why healing is power, not performative power, not power that dominates, not power that becomes cold. Quiet power, the power to pause, the power to discern, the power to say, no, this isn't enough. The power to walk away from almost, the power to stop confusing desire with destiny, the power to choose a peaceful life over an addictive connection. And maybe that's where I want to leave this part of the conversation, not with the idea that walking away is easy, but with the truth that walking away can become the doorway back to your voice, the doorway back to your standards, the doorway back to your body, the doorway back to joy, the doorway back to faith in yourself, the doorway back to love that does not require your diminishment. Because the point of healing is not just to get over someone. The point of healing is to become someone who no longer confuses pain with partnership, to become someone who can recognize peace when it arrives, to become someone who no longer begs where she should be discerning, to become someone who understands that being chosen by the wrong person is not a blessing, to become someone who knows that true love will never demand the death of her self-respect. So if you are standing in that place right now, between what you know and what you fear, between what hurts and what you still hope for, between the urge to go back and the wisdom to let go, hear me clearly, you are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to disappoint people who only had access to the version of you that overgave. You are allowed to close the door on what keeps reopening your wounds. You are allowed to outgrow the love that taught you survival instead of peace. You are allowed to stop calling it a lesson you still need when really it is a cycle you finally need to end. You are allowed to say, I wanted this to work. I really did. But warning it is no longer enough. And that sentence might break your heart, but it might also save your life. Because there are seasons when saving your life does not look dramatic. It looks like not replying. It looks like deleting the thread. It looks like crying and not going back. It looks like calling a friend instead of calling him. It looks like choosing therapy. It looks like choosing prayer. It looks like taking a walk when your mind wants to spiral. It looks like letting reality stand. It looks like refusing to fund your own heartbreak with one more chance that was never earned. That is how women rebuild themselves. Not all at once, but one boundary at a time, one honest moment at a time, one act of self-trust at a time, and eventually you become unfamiliar to the version of you that used to settle. That is growth. When what once felt irresistible now feels unsafe. When what once felt romantic now feels immature. When what once felt impossible to leave now feels impossible to return to. That is growth. And one day, maybe sooner than you think, you will look back and realize that the moment you thought you were losing everything was the moment you stopped losing yourself. Pause. And that is where real power begins.